From the very beginning, Kaisi just always had our hearts.
She was full of energy. She loved to, she did dancing for a couple years and then she did cheerleading. She was super smart. Her teacher would tell us all the time how well she was doing in school, and she loved to learn. Every morning she'd ask if it was school day.
She loved to learn, and which was one of the reasons we knew that when she got sick, that she had to be really sick, because it was a Monday and she says, I don't want to go to school today, I don't feel good to go to school. And we realized, oh, that's unusual. We thought that she had a stomach flu, and so, she didn't ever ask for water, because we just gave it to her. We just kept giving her a Sprite or water and just kept it full for her.
I finally took her into our family doctor here in town. Her brother had also stayed home from school on that Wednesday, so I ended up taking him to the doctor too. And he looked her over, kind of, asked what her signs and symptoms were, and Daxton had complained of a sore throat. And he looked at Daxton's throat and he's like, you know what? He's got strep throat. So he diagnosed them both with strep throat and gave us antibiotics for both of them. And I remember leaving that day and telling Josh, I'm like, it's so weird because she's complained of a lot of things, but not a sore throat.
I remember I was at work and Jamie called and says, Daxton's already back to school. She seems to be doing worse. And I said, well, you need to give it more time, and because she had just started the antibiotic. I got home late that night and I remember she was just sleeping. And so I sat her up and I put her at the table there and I'm like, please, Kaisi, and I got her a bowl of cereal. And I'm like, please eat this, and she just wouldn't. And so I got and I looked in her mouth, and her mouth was full, and it was green. And so I called the dentist, and why is it green? Well, did she start an antibiotic recently? Well, yeah, she did. Okay, and then I got her in for the bath, and that's when I noticed that she'd lost a lot of weight. So when I take her shirt off to get her in the bath, I'm like, my goodness, she's just skin and bones. That night she threw up probably 6 or 7 times. I kind of started, this is something different. And so I said, Jamie, first thing in the morning you get in there and you just go right to their office and just say, you're seeing us, I don't care.
And that was when he just, he looked in her mouth and he says, it's not strep throat. He gave me a few options. He's like, well, you give it another day. He's like, you could go put her in the hospital and get her hydrated, or you could go to the ER. I just said to him, I'm like, she's just so sick. Like, I'm not gonna do this one more day. And so we were literally like packing her into the ER at this point because she just had no energy.
They called us back and they sat us down, and I started to tell them, this is what happened, this is where we're at. And it clicked to me as I was telling the doctor what the signs were. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's diabetes, it's type 1 diabetes. And he said the same thing.
Yeah, he knew right away.
He said, I think it's type 1. And I had an MRI scheduled for a month. And so I ran just down the hall to get an MRI, and I was on the table, they were ready to wheel me into the thing, and my phone rang twice. And so they give it to me, and Jamie's crying, and she said that they were life flighting her. That was a shock to me, because I'm like, why? It's diabetes. Why are you life flighting for diabetes? I don't get this. And she says she's really sick, and they've got to life flight her. They have to take you by ambulance over to the airport. And so Jamie and Kaisi got on the ambulance, and I just gave her a kiss and said, I love her, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Once we landed in Salt Lake, we had to land at the airport. And so we landed and they got us put into the ambulance, and they just said from there, they're like, it's about a 20-minute ride to the hospital. We'd only been gone about 5 minutes when she started seizing. And then once we arrived at Primary Children's, she seized again.
Kaisi was unresponsive. She was in a coma. When Jamie called me when she had her seizure, I was still almost 3.5 hours away. When I got up there, they told me that she's in a diabetic coma, and that in these cases, usually they wake up in anywhere from 6 hours to 24 hours later. And so the two of us sat by her, and we waited in 6 hours, 12 hours, and at 24 hours they came and said that they'd like to do an MRI. The neurologist just pulled up the MRI, and he said that this was horrible. It's just the worst news is that she had suffered a brain herniation into her brain stem. So when pressure in her brain got so high because of the DKA and the cerebral edema. It pushed the brain down into the brain stem, and then it choked off all the blood supply. So she had strokes all the way up through her brain. And so they said, I don't think she's going to make it. We all want to be positive, and we want to look at the good of things. And sometimes by doing that, though, we forget how serious a condition it really is. And so you look at a picture and you see this little girl with curly blonde hair, blue eyes, who's full of life and full and exciting. And in 5 days, she has severe brain damage. Kids get sick, think about that. Keep that in the back of your mind. Is this something that happened to that little girl, Casey? Is this, could it be that? It might not, probably isn't, but could it be?
We want to continue to raise awareness and continue to keep her face on that awareness, because people see her face on something and they're drawn to it. That's kind of our mission, is to continue to keep spreading awareness, and hopefully it helps, even if it helps one person. She was sent here for a reason, and she had a purpose, and a really big purpose.